Hello, you're watching News9 Live. In a major development in the same-sex marriage hearing at the Supreme Court, CJI D.Y. Chandrachud clarified that the court shall decide the constitutional issue regarding the right of queer couples to marry, regardless of the concessions that the government makes to accommodate LGBT relationships. The CJI made the statement after the Solicitor General of India informed the Supreme Court that the central government is agreeable to constituting a committee to examine whether certain legal rights can be granted to same-sex couples without legal recognition of the relationship as a marriage. So let's understand if this is a forward movement, as in is it affirmative action that has been taken in this so-called contentious same-sex marriage issue. In the studio, my colleague Ashok Bagria is with me. Also joining us is Sonal Gyani, who is LGBTQIA+ activist of South Asia, and also Ashish Pandey, who is advocate with the Supreme Court. Ashok, to you first. I mean, do you look at it as some people have said, I was reading Twitter, they said it's buying time, it's really nothing that, we can take home. But do you think that there is some kind of, it's been propelled a little instead of, status quo, as it were?
Well, in a way, if you look at it, it's a way forward. See, ever since Section 377 was decriminalized, one thing was established, that people of the same sex were entitled to cohabit together. Now, after this right was recognized, there were subsidiary rights which were to follow. Now, what has really happened is that LGBTQ couples have approached the Supreme Court saying that we want legal recognition to our marriages.
Right.
You recognize our marriages, and their argument is that heterosexual couple marriages is being recognized, why not ours? We are the same citizens of the country. Basically, an anti-discriminatory argument is being used there. And they are saying, and that argument is correct, that they are being discriminated against. Now, the government of India comes forward with a move saying that we are going to set up a committee.
Right.
The committee will be headed by the senior most civil servant of the country, that is the cabinet secretary. And what this committee will do is basically look into issues that these same-sex couples face on a daily basis. So, for instance, what was argued in the court was that they face problems with respect to opening of joint accounts.
Yeah.
They have problems with respect to buying family insurance. They have problems with respect to pension rights, gratuity rights, residence rights, and subsequently. Now, what the government of India is suggesting is that as far as these rights are concerned,
right,
we can make some provisions for them by making tweaks in the administrative side, by passing some administrative orders, making change in some government orders or in RBI regulation which can be tweaked, and that can be done. So, in a way, what you're looking at is a scenario where on one hand, the LGBTQ community is asking for a situation where same-sex marriages are recognized and the consequential benefits follow.
right.
Here the government of India is saying that we are giving you some consequential benefits in the terms of recognizing your rights, but we are not going to recognize the right to, we are not going to legally recognize same-sex marriages,
Right.
because the Supreme Court of India has no business determining this.
Right.
This is something which only Parliament can do.
Right. So, but I'm going to discuss whether it's a glass half full. I'm going to go to Sonal as well as Ashish. But before that, let's listen in to certain arguments which took place in the court today.
When we go into the conceptual domain,
Yes.
we cannot be oblivious of the fact that to the extent to which the conceptual domain requires legislative changes, that part clearly lies outside the
Part of
limit
the
of the court.
dialectics. Well, that'll be part of the dialectics.
Then the question which the court will have to face is, to what extent does the court go in formulating conceptual doctrine?
Yes, absolutely.
Because ultimately, whatever doctrine the court formulates has to be relevant on the ground. All right? Therefore, there may be three levels really. There may be certain areas which are governed by pure administrative,
Exactly.
pure administrative changes.
That's what
which
I
can easily be done by them. Second, changes which they accept as a matter of principle, which may require changes in some form of subordinate regulation.
Subordinate.
Which again is a matter for the government. They don't have to go to parliament for that, which is again much easier to achieve than, say, a parliamentary change in legislation. The third is your wider,
Exactly.
your widest case, your fundamental point is that, well, there is a right to marry, one, with reference to constitutional precepts, even for same-sex couples. Second, that you can found that or source it in the Special Marriage
It's
Act.
not a hollow right, it's not just a
That is what you have all
label.
argued. That is what you have all argued. That's something which we will have to ultimately decide, subject, and therefore that's what their argument is.
That's all that I'm saying.
That this is essentially a legislative arena. Don't step into this.
Dr. Singh, yes.
Therefore, we are saying that, well, we will of course have to decide it. We are going to decide this entire issue as a matter of concept. But to the extent to which the government takes the first step forward, there would be a substantial benefit, a substantial advancement in the recognition
a welcome
of
thing
the
and we welcome
cohabitational relationship of same-sex couples in the country today, which would be a substantial advance beyond what we have today.
Yes.
And according to your submissions, then that the court can go into, namely to recognize that same-sex couples would have a right to cohabit together and cohabit together in a normal, peaceable environment in our country without any form of discrimination, either societal or otherwise. Step two, that the government would, as we now see from your very fair suggestion that the Cabinet Secretary, no less than the Cabinet Secretary would be going to it, would be recognizing the incidence of that cohabitational relationship. So we can certainly build upon our jurisprudence as going to that level. Question now is, and we don't want to stop them, whether we make that extra mile, which is what they have argued. And we have also argued that, look, this part would be a legislative exercise, don't step into that.
Well, my first proposition is right to get a particular social relationship recognized as a marriage is not a fundamental right, Manoj.
Let's read it quickly. Let's read the note.
Yes, but I'll just quickly, Manoj, go through. It is submitted that over and above marriage, there are a whole host of human relationships which exist in society, which may in some cases be even more valuable than marriage. The statutory law in any country in the world does not regulate all human relationships. The said relationship may be extremely important from the perspective of life and liberty and the dignity attached to it, and may further even have a more profound impact on the life of a person. However, sans a legitimate state interest, legislatures across the world have left a whole host of human relationships completely outside the legislative purview, denying any legal recognition to the same. It is submitted.
Sonal Gyani, let me get you in as somebody who represents the community and has worked diligently, for the rights. I want to ask you that, how do you look at it? Do you think you look at it as glass half full or glass half empty? Because, of course, there is legalese involved in this, but then the way you perceive it and the way it impacts the community is, I think, of paramount importance here.
Yes. I definitely look at it as, I think, glass half empty. However, having said that, I definitely think it's a forward move from the government, something we didn't even consider that they would even move those 2 steps ahead. But this can't, but when they make a move like this in court, you can't help but think that why didn't this happen earlier?
Okay.
They had 5 years to think about the same thing. It's only when, this matter has come up in the court that the government is going ahead and that too, even considering making a committee. But one doesn't feel very confident because there was the Nalsa judgment, there has been the decriminalization. The government is, offers to set up committees, but no implementation really happens on the ground in the way that is sort of required. However, even then, I think it's interesting because when you look at the patterns in other countries, a lot of them, where countries were not, accepting of, say, touching on marriage as an institution, they did guarantee civil union to its citizens. And perhaps India can consider something like that. However, when I look at the ground community who doesn't understand these kind of intricacies, and if I look at the language that is at the grassroots, what people do want is their marriage to be recognized and their dream to be the same as their heterosexual counterparts to be available to them. And I think in that sense, it's not equal. And sure, you may grant us the rights, but what we are also fighting for is the social recognition on
Absolutely.
similar terms, right?
Yes.
Which doesn't end up happening.
Yeah.
When you do this is basically, it seems like a half job, half done, and it's really imagining how to do that job half. So that's where I
Right.
am.
Right. Ashwini, let me come to you, considering that, you're a lawyer. That's what the thing is, that when I told Sonal that happiness of two people who want to be with each other is of paramount importance, of course, within the ambit of legality. But here, look at it. I mean, how does one read it? One part says that, we will grant you some rights, but listen, we can't give you legal sanction for being married, for getting married. The other side says that no, you can get married, we can give it to you. Where does one stand? It is like, I can be married in the sense of under let's say right to freedom, fundamental right and stuff like that. But on the other hand, the point is that you do not get social recognition, which I think the institution of marriage requires. And why not? Because it is unequal not to for you to recognize my marriage.
Yeah, see, the fundamental question is, once this 377 was decriminalized, so a path was set. And what is happening today, I feel that it's a progress in that particular direction. Now, if we look at this entire debate, not only what is happening in court, but at the level of society as well. So what exactly LGBT community is trying to achieve here? Is it only just the legal recognition of their marriage? And let me clarify here, as far as the marriage is concerned. So the act of marriage is not illegal as on today, because the same-sex relationship has been decriminalized. So one can marry and live peacefully in their private sphere. Now the question is, once such couples go outside of their private spheres, there are two parts. One is, that is, as rightly pointed out, and what was pointed out by the LGBT community representatives and their lawyers in court as well, that there are certain very small tasks in society, like opening of bank accounts, opening of, let's say, the insurance policies, and a number of things are there where such kind of problems they are facing, that we cannot recognize you as a married couple. Now, the second part is, even if these things are granted to them without recognizing, granting them the status of legally wedded couple, so whether how that would be possible for our society to accept that thing, because societal changes, I believe, is what LGBT community is looking for in long run. What they are looking for, that if we go out as a couple, there should not be, eyes.
Stigma. Stigma,
yes,
and which is very important. And I'm going to come back to you. Ashok, correct me if I'm wrong. Apparently, amendments have been made by states, like Tamil Nadu, for instance, where apparently the Saath Feras, they do not hold the importance as it is done, let's say, in your state, Rajasthan or anywhere else. I'm from Tamil Nadu. We don't take Saath Feras. So some amendments must have been made to the entire, so I'm asking you, that is it something which is so non-pliable that, that what is the real issue here? Because the government of the day was very reluctant right in the beginning. They think, and not just them, but the other clergy also were very, very clear. What do you think is the larger problem here?
See, what I see is that the government's problem is that they say that the majority in this country is opposed to the whole idea of LGBTQ. The second thing is, legally speaking, they're saying that, number one, whether to grant recognition to some institution, social institution, is entirely in the domain of Parliament, and the court should keep away from it. Because they apprehend that if they let the court step in this time, there will be situations in future where the courts will always step in. So they want to make sure that that doesn't happen. The third issue is that, which I find a little confusing, is the issue is that until and unless you don't bring in a law how will you change the societal mindset? The government is saying, the government stand is, let the society's mindset change or the society get mature enough so that they accept it, and once that acceptance comes in, then we'll grant you, then the parliament will be the competent authority to decide whether recognition has to be granted or not. But there is a flaw in this argument. In the past, we have seen that certain social welfare measures, like let's say talk about prevention of sati.
Yeah.
This was
Child Marriage Act.
Child marriages. This was a measure which was introduced by the law even when there was great deal of resistance from the society. And once the law was there, the society followed suit.
1827, Lord Bentinck,
Yeah.
I think. Yeah, that's right.
So
Yes.
that either that is the way to go around about doing it, bring in the law and let the change happen.
Yeah.
Or either you want to bring in the change first and then recognize.
Don't you think the latter is better, Ashok? You bring in the law. At least, you know, you will not be, people are not going to stone you, laugh at you, or kind of be, there have been, you know, violent outbursts. I mean,
I'm personally in favor of bringing in a law.
Yes.
And let the mindset
change. Absolutely.
I'm personally in favor of it. But the government here, the courts will not decide on what I and you think, but they will decide on matters of judicial principles as to how it is to be adjudicated.
Right.
The government of India is saying that we'll give them some consequential benefits, we'll pass it on to same-sex couples. But this will be halfway from recognizing same-sex marriages.
Right, right.
However, the issue still remains that when will recognition to same-sex marriages come?
Yes, absolutely. Sonal, let me come to you now. You know, certain rights will be given to same-sex couples, like Ashok was also talking about. You must have read it, insurance and, you know, provident fund, etc., because these issues were brought up. I have a small technical issue on that. Maybe I'll ask Ashwini about how do you, the nomenclature, I mean, will you be my spouse or will you be my wife? I'm sure that, you know, because those provident fund you know, forms are so archaic. I mean, I also resent it. They ask me, are you married? You know, why should you ask me? I have children, maybe I'm not married, you know. So it's very archaic and it's very official dumb, which acts there. My question to you is there. Let's look at the serious issues. Adoption, Sonal. Or in a worse situation, domestic abuse. Now, how will those rules apply? You know, कुछ भी हो सकता है ना, adoption का option हो सकता है या खुदा ना खास्ता. Agar even if you have domestic abuse, I want to know what happens to those. I mean, these are important, but not only, no, also.
Yes. So I think like they are very relevant questions. In fact, you know, these are some questions that even my mother, in fact, has been asking me, even though she's very much in support of marriage. Things like, you know, how does the ceremony work? Even if you did get married, you know, how is the ceremony and things going to work? And I think those technicalities are important to sort of work out. I think like from the space that I come in from, like for about 15 years, I've been working on diversity and inclusion. I think first, I think it's very important to just start using gender neutral language. And so much of the gender neutral language is available. And in fact, you yourself pointed out to spouse.
Yes.
I think spouse and partner is an interesting dynamic. Now, when it comes to, you know, separate, I would say kind of benefits that are available to women, say, you know, in matter of, say, domestic violence cases, it's important to look at why they came into place in the first place, right? They came into place because there was a power structure imbalance, right, between the two genders. And this was one of the main reasons that you looked at laws like these. So it's important to remember that when same-sex marriages are happening, it's not the same gender dynamic. It is not a man-woman. It is a man-man and a woman-woman. And I think that instead of trying to change the existing daily laws, what you might want to do is like look at, you know, how laws were prior to these laws coming in and allow those gender norms to work out to help you inform how you want the law to be applicable. That's one bit, even about age or things like that. As far as, you know, marriage rights and things around, you know, religious ceremonies are concerned, it's not like where people haven't been doing marriages. But like, as you rightly pointed out in the case of Tamil Nadu, it is not like even marriage ceremonies or codes are written in stone. With
Absolutely.
time, they
Yes.
also, they also progress it. It's a progressive mindset. In fact, heterosexual couples have now started to change what they are, sort of saying in ceremonies. That's part two. And then, part three of it, I would say, is that like when it comes to things like, say, adoption or things like where, other family structures pan out, or, even things like, okay, what should be the age, where these couples get married. So I think you might want to go at the basic minimum. So if you think, okay, 21, all right, 21 or 16, you just go ahead with it. I am very afraid that what is happening is that currently in the court, the fact that these technicalities are being used as a way of denying rights, and that is something we should guard against. What
Right.
I'm finding is the idea that you'll have to do more work to figure this out, and things which the communities have already figured out because they are existing in this society anyway, right, are being used to deny us rights. So I
Right.
think like with over time, people will also realize that when you do look at, say, a lesbian marriage or a gay marriage, heterosexual people will learn a lot in terms of, how do you actually balance the power, between a couple. How does a couple look like when there is no, gender related, power imbalance.
Right.
So I think
Right.
it's lots for other people to sort of also learn from this kind of setup.
Right.
But yeah, again, coming back to, we have to guard, against people using technicalities in the way of, as a means of
Right.
denying rights.
Right.
Yeah.
Ashish, let me come to you. Ashish, tell me something. Child rights activists have been opposed to this. I mean, 3 weeks ago, they wrote about, what kind of a messaging, according to them, does it send to a child? Because, they will not be able to differentiate when it comes to gender. And I think it's a good thing you're gender neutral. But do you think that is one issue? Because that is also part of this entire narrative. And do you think a lot of tweaking will have to be done when it comes to adoption and also the child of such a couple?
Yeah, these are very pertinent questions, and I know. I mean, the argument has been raised here that technicalities are being used to somehow stall the process. But the fact remains, these technicalities are not superficial technicalities. I am, as an individual, I'm completely pro LGBT rights. I support that there should be some sort of legal recognition. But you see, as you rightly pointed out, two spheres are there. And yeah, if I'm not wrong, it was pointed out by the Honorable Bench itself that social technicalities will come later. First, we will have to deal with legal technicalities, which will be there in front of us if we recognize such marriages. Now, I'll come to child rights later, but first, let's discuss, as was pointed out by you, that n number of laws have been enacted in India,
Yes.
which are not gender neutral. Those laws are pro women. So let's say there is instance of domestic violence in same-sex marriage. Then how this sections of IPC will be applicable? What role will be assigned to whom? Who's exposed to the wrath of law? And let's say even in CRPC, if you say women have a right to claim maintenance from their husbands under Section 125 CRPC. So it was pointed out by London Solicitor General as well. I'm not supporting either side. What I'm saying that these are real legal technicalities which are required to be resolved before any conclusive order is passed in this regard, or if a legislation is brought by the Parliament after proper deliberations.
Right.
And as far as you see, child's rights are concerned, this is you're absolutely right. Let's say a child is adopted and he or she, the baby is not of that age where she or he can understand what are going to be the implications of if they have been adopted by gay couples. That thing can be ascertained only once she or he has attained majority, and how that baby, once he or she attains majority, will react? That is also one of the very pertinent
Right,
questions, and
Ashish.
there is no real answer to this question.
There isn't, Ashok, I'll come to you. I mean, they both have. I just want to know that, do you think there is a mighty confusion about if I am a same sex, I mean, I am one of those, and in the sense one person, and I'm in love with the same sex. Do you think I should be mighty confused today because the court says that, we will give you legal sanction, we will, I'll recognize your marriage, but on the other hand, they said we will give you certain rights. How should I look at it? Will it get super complicated if it stops here, or you think no, it will unravel itself as we go along?
Well, actually, as I see it, Sudha, it's very simple. It's that what the court is saying is that your highest goal is to achieve recognition of same-sex marriage. What we are giving you, or what possibly the government is giving you, is something short of it. We are saying that this movement, LGBTQ movement, which has started for the recognition of their rights, of their fundamental rights, has still a long way to go. Because what will happen is that we are faced with some great complex question as far as the Supreme Court is concerned. Now, on one hand, the Supreme Court has to figure out a way that while determining these rights for the LGBTQ community, how far they can go. Can they encroach into the legislative domain? What is the rationale for encroaching into the legislative domain? Even if they have encroached into the legislative domain, what will be the fallout on the ground? Will there be consequent changes into laws which will be made? Now, Ashish pointed out a few things as far as the Domestic Violence Act is concerned, that, or maintenance is concerned, that the spousal roles are still defined in terms of a man and a woman.
Yes, true.
Okay, those changes will have to be made. Now, what really happened is that we could possibly take a cue from what happened in the United States of America, is that when the US Supreme Court recognized same-sex marriages, what really followed was, for months, the government and the LGBTQI community sat together trying to figure out only what laws needed to be changed so that their rights could come to them in the manner which was designed by the US Supreme Court. So here also, in the best case scenario, I don't know how it will play out, but there will be a lot of difficulties. Even if today the Supreme, for argument's sake, we accept that Supreme Court is recognizing same-sex marriages. How, fair enough, you recognize same-sex marriages, but how do you implement it on the ground? How does it come into play? There will have to be changes. At least the Solicitor General of India showed that there were 150 laws which would need change.
Wow.
Yeah. So how will that happen? In what time period will they come through? Now, these are the 150 are the identifiable laws. There will be other bylaws, smaller directions, circulars, etc., which will have to be changed. So until and that comprehensive exercise is not taken care of, I don't think the LGBTQ community will actually be able, despite getting legal recognition of marriages, they will be able to get what they are really looking for.
Yes, we started this conversation with that, Ashok, and it's a good note to end. I've completely run out of time. But you know what? Some forward movement. It is not status quo. And I think that is very encouraging, considering I'm going to stick my neck out and say it, but it's more than obvious. I support the same-sex marriage. Thanks are due to Ashok, my colleague, and of course to you, Ashish Pandey, and also Sonal Gyani. Thank you very much for a riveting conversation. Thank you indeed. For all the news and updates, keep watching News9 Live.